our next session to start. A quick introduction of Jeffrey Chong one more time. Jeffrey is the Business Development Manager at Mayflower Holidays, and he will cover the factors seniors should consider before travel, the safety and risk concerns, and the best practices during travel amidst COVID-19. Very relevant, very timely at this time. So I'll just hand it over to you, Jeffrey, if you're ready.
Yes, I am. Let me share my screen. Okay, first thing, good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm loud and clear. And I hope, yeah, okay, thanks for the confirmation, Raj. And I hope that, you know, after you've put such a much nicer picture, I hope this live video doesn't disappoint and differ too much from the picture that you shared just now. But good afternoon, everybody, and allow me to jump in to the slides I have in place, and let's see how that works out. All right. Okay. Can everyone see my slides? Yep. Yes. All right. I see heads nodding. I'm good to go. So I'm going to touch on a topic that is not so familiar already for now. In a sense where, you know, people used to travel a lot more 2 years back, pre-pandemic, and now people are not so familiar anymore in a way where, you know, things are different. Maybe domestically, it's still all right. There isn't much changes, but especially if you talk about going abroad, crossing the borders, there might be new things that needs to be considered, factors that will be a bit more challenging post-pandemic, or, you know, as we glide out of this pandemic. So I'm just going to touch on certain factors that might be worth considering before we leave our homes and go for our next travel. So in terms of preparation, first things that we think about is advisories, travel advisories. These are ever changing, and that's the challenge. And we don't know when they change, and it's always good to have reference websites in place. So before travel, always check on travel restrictions to exit or enter Malaysia if you're going abroad. And even as for our own domestic travel as well, I always recommend that, you know, we be on the lookout on the areas that we are visiting. Are we going to be close to an area that might be that might be a higher risk compared to where we are? Are there a lot of cases in the places that we visit? And aside from that, in terms of traveling abroad, we recommend to actually check visas, entry, transit restrictions if it's not a direct flight, along with the documentation if it's necessary to the destination. Now, just for example, we are also familiar to, you know, show our MySejahtera when we go places, and that's very common in Malaysia. But for example, if we were to go to a different country, what do you need to do? Do they recognize your MySejahtera, for example? And what do you need to do to prepare yourselves in proving that you're vaccinated? So these are things that will be worthwhile considering. So aside from that, a general area of reference I recommend is this link here called from Skyscanner under travel restrictions. You will be able to actually check if there are any extra restrictions. Is quarantine required at the destination you're going to? And details like that. So it covers all across the globe. As far as I know, they cover every area that I've tried to test them. So that's a good point. And aside from that, the health assessment on vaccination requirements and COVID-19 test requirements of the countries that you're visiting. So what type of COVID test do they need to see upon you entering the country? and do you need to fill out a form before you actually go to the country? So these are things that, previously, for example, we never need to consider that seriously, but this is ever changing, and we are traveling in a new norm in per se. So it is really important for us to check these other elements as well before we even travel. Aside from the destination, each airline have their own procedures as well. So it's also important to check what is mandatory when it comes to the airline, the individual airline that you're using. And this information is available via the airline website as well. So that's also another process. And aside from that, quarantine requirements specifically, you can also check for arrival or transiting destinations while arranging necessary quarantine tests upon returning to home country. So if you're returning home back to Malaysia, for example, like, it's previously 14 days quarantine. And after that, an announcement was made to 7. And, it's ever changing. And we always recommend to also check not only the requirements of entering other countries, but also what are the changes or updates in terms of returning back to Malaysia. So do have all this in consideration. And when it comes to selecting your flights, I mean, I understand, I'm a bargain hunter myself. And I like to go for the cheapest flights available, definitely, who wouldn't? But now with things being a bit volatile, I really recommend, if it isn't a big amount extra to pay, it's really highly recommendable, and it gives you a peace of mind to book flexible tickets. For example, tickets that don't charge you extra for any changes in dates, for example. And aside from date changes, it's also recommended to get these flexible tickets because you want refundable flights as well. You don't want to be caught in a situation where you've bought your tickets and you couldn't travel last minute, and your flight is non-refundable. So despite the thought process that you might have saved by getting a cheap ticket upfront, but if the ticket is non-refundable and you really couldn't make it to your flight, that money is so sadly gone. So it's really worthwhile considering in that area. And even accommodation as well. There are many properties and hotels that are very flexible nowadays, and towards understanding as well, to a sense where you just need to top up a bit of extra premium, or maybe they have flexibility upfront when it comes to changing your dates and cancellations as well because of travel restrictions. So they might not mind, adding terms and conditions that make it flexible for you to change your hotel stay if you couldn't make it, or maybe even refund it if it's possible. So these are really factors that are much more valuable now, if you ask me, compared to previously, because things can change really out of your plan. So it's best to manage all this as much as possible, in my opinion. And aside from that as well, I'm not sure if everyone here is aware, but there are certain travel insurance available now. Especially, during this pandemic, we've learned a lot as well on the needs to actually be protected extra beyond the normal travel insurance. So there are, for example, Mayflower, we offer pandemic insurance. So these insurance covers extra stuff, like in the event that you unfortunately have COVID while you're traveling, and there are some medical expenses incurred because of this. So it really costs a bit extra compared to the normal travel insurance, but now it's the safe the value of having that, safe of mind kind of thing where you really don't need to worry too much, really gives us an assurance as we try and explore travel once again. So this is actually what we really recommend in terms of preparing for your travel before you actually go and travel, to actually have all this in place and understanding it before, taking the next step. Now, aside from that, I just want to bring up specific states as well. Within Peninsula, it's rather standardized. A lot of us are in phase 4 already. But when it comes to Sabah and Sarawak, there are specific guidelines to enter Sabah per se, especially from Peninsula. You can refer to it. It's dynamic in the link. So if there's any updates, always check before you travel. So generally, as of yesterday, the last I've checked is that you're advised to submit the health declaration form, okay, at least 12 hours before arriving to Sabah. Okay, I mean, Sabah is like my second home. I grew up there, so I'm definitely planning to go there. And you need to submit this form. And of course, there is another risk assessment form after that as well, where you will be coming along with your QR code. You can check your status of these two forms in this link as well, this same link as well. You'll be able to check the status of your submission, whether it is approved or not, or if there's any updates. And once it's available, you can print out and proceed to show or continue in the action column. So, these are things that, you need to show the reference number along with the available QR code from check status when required by the medical team when you enter Sabah, or you can do a printout if you want. So that would be something that is kind of new when you travel into Sabah. More details are available in that link there, and it's relatively easy to use. As for Sarawak, Sarawak as well also have their own guidelines. And for non-Sarawakians per se, you need to provide an Enter Sarawak application. The links are all here in this slide, and also it's shareable as well, where you need to show your application approval and do a health declaration form before departure to Sarawak. And for unvaccinated individuals below the age of 17, you must be accompanied with parents and guardians that are fully vaccinated. And they also require a COVID-19 PCR or an RTK swab test at least 3 days prior to arriving Sarawak. And sorry, this also applies to Sabah as well. You need to at least do a RTK swab test before you enter Sabah. So all this information is available in the links here, and it's ever changing, and I always recommend to go to the website itself to do the reference and checks, because whatever I mention now might not be relevant the day after, for example. So these are good reference guides. So if you are not that adventurous, or you want to do domestic travel to Sabah or Sarawak, these are the extra steps that you will need to take in order to go into these states. Now, so what are the risks and concerns during the travel? So when you've already got all your approvals, printed out your vaccination proofs as well, what should we be thinking about when we travel? So, contracting COVID-19 during your trip to a different country, this is definitely a possibility. We all have to face this fact. And, so the next question is, are you properly insured in the event hospitalization is necessary? Okay, it can be quite real. And despite being vaccinated, you might, if you are, very weak and you might need, you reach a certain phase where you might need hospitalization, are you properly insured? And these are things that are available in the market to at least protect you on an insurance angle, and definitely something worthwhile considering as compared to saving. Aside from that, what other risk is that, sudden changes in destination country border restrictions. Even I was working with British Airways previously, and back in the day, I had clients that travel all the way to South America, and border restrictions suddenly just announce and implement the day after, that kind of situation. It's happened before. I'm not sure if it will happen again, but it's good to actually mentally prepare and pace ourselves, so to say, what will happen. So in that angle, are you financially secured as well to return, excuse the typo, to return to your home country in an emergency? Like, if an announcement is up, everyone will panic, go to the airport, get the first available flight out of the country before the restriction comes in. So these are things that, we have to keep that in mind. And, are we ready, in the event we need to come back in an emergency because of a border restriction? And this goes back as well to the point I made just now in terms of the importance of getting flexible, refundable tickets, because you never know when it will come in handy. And aside from that as well, what happens if there's a sudden change in returning home to the home country quarantine restrictions and procedures? So, we are always caught off guard sometimes whenever SOPs are updated or changed, okay? And we also need to have that in mind. So while you're traveling, maybe in Europe, in Thailand, wherever you are, we need to also ask ourselves, would you have the time and resource to accommodate any changes in terms of coming back? So for example, quarantine, it used to be 14 days and now it's reduced to 7 days. Like, what happens if you are traveling and coincidentally an announcement was made that now the quarantine changes to 21 days? Can you accommodate that? So it's really something to know and also prepare ourselves. And I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is aware, like, although home quarantine is allowed for us to come back to Malaysia, the application can only be done 7 days before coming back. So these are things that, it's good that we preempt and ask ourselves before we travel. And, when we are traveling as well, be aware if there's any changes in requirements when we come back. So previously, for example, it was only mandatory hotel quarantine, and then there was more relaxation to allow home quarantine. So it can be to your favor, these changes, but we also need to be safe and think, what if it's not to our favor? Aside from that as well, getting your vaccination recognized by local authorities for ease of travel. So as I mentioned just now as well, a lot of countries thankfully accept our printout from MySejahtera, our vaccination, the PDF portion, and there's a QR code for people to check. It's getting more and more popular. So a lot of immigrations also do recognize it, and it's good to know. And a good question would be, have you provided the local authorities proof of vaccination in the event it's necessary? So usually some countries, or even, like I mentioned just now, a lot of places now require you to actually declare your health, declare your vaccination status before you even arrive. So it would always be good to actually prepare not only soft copy in your phone, but also hard copy as well, just to have this extra proof that when you travel, who knows what happens to your phone, at least you have a hard copy to show that, okay, I'm vaccinated, and you'll be able to do more things and go more places as you travel. Aside from that, door-to-door best practice. So when I mean door-to-door here is like really from leaving the door of your house to the actual door of your hotel per se. What are things to consider, when you travel. So as you travel, definitely similar to whatever we implement as well, we foresee a lot more demand for smaller group travel, no more large groups of 30, 40 people, and a lot of family travel as well, small groups, and avoiding crowded places of attractions as well. And, for example, many attractions even allow like fast tracks as well, where you don't need to queue along with the large crowd. And by paying a bit extra, you get to skip the line and go to the attraction without being in a crowd. So that's something really worth considering. And of course, cleanliness and hygiene of all modes of transportation is a must. Because for example, when I say mode of transportation, it's not just the aircraft that you bought. Actually, that's the easy part because there's a manifest. But what happens if you take a taxi, for example? There isn't really much contact tracing, so to say. And these are things where, there might be undocumented prior passengers before you. So cleanliness and hygiene is definitely something that will always be at the back of our mind when we travel. And of course, eateries that we visit and also the accommodations. Accommodations, especially now, a lot of hotels that I notice actually boast and promote that, how frequent, what's the procedures that they take in order to sanitize their rooms, for example. So these are things that worth really keeping in mind as we slowly come out of this pandemic and do more travel as we move on. Aside from that, readily install all necessary contact tracing apps of the arrival country. So like I said, we are so familiar with having MySejahtera, and other countries have their own versions of MySejahtera, and it's always highly recommended, even for people coming into Malaysia, to install your MySejahtera before you even come here. God knows what's going to happen to your data service provider or the Wi-Fi of the airport. And this is something that, I hear from a lot of travelers. It's really worthwhile to do that research and make sure you install all the necessary apps for contact tracing in your destination country. I have friends that just came into Malaysia and they didn't prepare all this as well, so they couldn't do a lot of things. So for everyone in this call, so to say, it's definitely worthwhile to keep ourselves prepared and registered. Aside from that as well, a good research on the most cost-effective and convenient location for PCR swab test is good, because we all know that, whether it's an airline restriction or returning to Malaysia restriction, a lot of them needs to see a proof of a PCR swab test. So, and the challenge with this is they always want the swab test to be done like 48 hours before you travel, so that we really need to factor that. And always keep in mind, when you go for this swab test before you come back or before you board the plane, time your 48 hours correctly, okay? And make sure that the test provider that you go to actually gives you the result on the same day, or at least they guarantee something like the next day. So these are things that really needs to be considered, and you need to prepare as well, so that you know that I'll be staying in Doubletree, Manchester, for example, and the nearest swab test available is just 10 minutes drive away. So, and the cost of it and the procedures involved. So it's really important to prepare ourselves for things like these already. Last but not least, we would definitely also continue to recommend having a self-test kit readily available for as you travel before you even leave the country. I noticed a lot of affordable self-test kits at convenience stores and also pharmacies. And it's really highly recommended to bring your own. I've surveyed prices of these self-test kits in other countries, and my goodness, we are getting a very good bargain here. So really no harm. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and do consider to bring your self-test kit as you travel, just to be safe. In the event you feel that you're not feeling well and you just want the assurance that I'm fit enough and to travel for the remaining amount of days. So this is really like the list of things that we highly recommend. And aside for our own, when we have when we pack for our travel, aside from the normal clothings that we get and whatever daily essentials that we have, I think this whole pandemic has given us a new list of travel essentials as well. Extra things to bring over as you go. And we recommend, having your own face mask as well. Extra, definitely, as you travel during this period. So for example, if you have double masking, just make sure you have prepared, whether it's for double masking or more. I'm not saying that, the destination you have don't sell masks, but you might not know the price that you're facing in a different country. So it's best to control all this within your ability. Aside from that, personal hand sanitizers should always be in your pockets in place. We recommend that. We are going to, so to say, uncharted territory when we travel most of the time. So keep in mind as well, because of the 100 ml limitation of a lot of airlines, you have it packed in small containers so that in the event you really need to use it, you have your own set of hand sanitizers. And to be honest, on a personal experience, even if I use hand sanitizers of out other places, you find that some of these hand sanitizers are really so sticky. I feel like I need to wash my hands after using it. So yeah, that's a personal preference, and you might have the same feeling as well. Disinfecting wipes as well would be good for cleaning common areas. So I have a habit, if I was to travel in an airplane, I bring a small pack of disinfectant wipes just to clean the area where you'll be eating and whatnot. And let's face it, a lot of flights come in, don't have enough turnaround time for it to be totally clean before it goes back out, returning to the home country. So really, why not do that extra step just for that peace of mind? Vitamin supplements on top of your regular supplements is definitely a must, just to boost your immune systems as you travel. Because of the weather change, the time zone, jet lag, your immune system definitely weakens as you travel. And it's not, we all don't recover at the same time, So definitely make sure you have all the supplements you need in order to boost up your immune system so that you don't get sick and spoil your travel as you're overseas maybe. And like I mentioned as well, having that COVID self-test kit always readily available. You can bring it across the border, and it's a lot so much affordable here as compared to other countries. So get that assurance, and doesn't weigh a lot more compared to what you have in your bag. That's actually all I have for my slides. And I noticed quite a number of questions in the chat box. I actually have someone, my team as well in here, but I'm not sure if they covered any of the questions. But I'll feel free to, maybe I should go through the questions, Raj?
Yeah. Yep, no worries. I've already compiled the questions, so I'll just read them out and
Thank you.
You can answer them. Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
I'll try my best.
Thanks so much for that, Jeffrey. Lots of valuable information, and I'm sure most of our participants will agree with that. Considering the fact that borders are beginning to open, and everybody wants to start traveling right now. So I'll get down to the questions right away. The first question I have here is from Lai Sin. I hope I've pronounced the name correctly. Lai Sin is asking about travel insurance. And just one second, sorry. Yeah, travel insurance, would it now include COVID-19 hospitalization or care, or would it be a rider?
Okay, so we have specific pandemic travel insurance. They really label it as pandemic travel insurance. So, and it covers all the bread and butter of travel when it comes to like lost baggage, delayed baggage, and whatnot. And it comes with basic protection when it comes to hospitalization up to a certain amount. But there are extra riders as well that you can get extra protection. And sometimes if we look back and do a bit of research on the price of hospitalization in other countries, you really feel that that extra amount that you pay will actually help you, give you a peace of mind. So there are some that make it a base, and some that have an add-on extra premium so that you're extra protected. Now, aside from that as well, I didn't mention one thing is that a lot of countries like Singapore, Thailand, and even Malaysia, we have the government also mandates that you purchase a certain level of insurance before coming into the country, and you prove it before you come into the country. So a lot of other countries have this, and this is actually something very good and encouraged as well, where from my observation, it's quite affordable. Like maybe the upcoming Malaysian one, it's still awaiting approval, but let me just share a bit. It costs anywhere less than 200 ringgit for a 100-day protection. And a lot of it, the premium covered really meets the government requirement of USD, I think 20/1000 or something like that. And it can even be topped up to actually protect you even more as you go into that country. So really no harm getting this type of protection on both areas, and do consider as well. Some countries, for example, even Malaysia as well, on 22nd November for people coming in, is that they also don't mind if you purchase a travel insurance from your home country to go there. And as long as that premium coverage, you can prove that it covers the minimum requirement to enter the country mandated by the local government, it will be acceptable. So it is an area to consider whether it is mandated. Is there a mandated amount, the minimum amount that needs to be met by the destination country, and whether you want to purchase one specifically as only an inbound or in the country kind of protection, or maybe a travel insurance that is an add-on rider that gives all this COVID-19 hospitalization protection. So I hope I've covered a broad spectrum in terms of that area, Raj.
Okay, great. Thanks. On to the next question. This is by Po Z Chu. Po is asking, will a booster shot be required, or is the 2 doses given earlier sufficient for overseas travel?
This is really subject to the individual countries, but just my observation, my general observation, like I was looking at London as well. Thank goodness the announcement was made like 2 days ago that Sinovac and Sinopharm, which a lot of people are vaccinated, is now recognized by the UK government. And they don't even mention anything about booster shots. So as long as you fulfill that 2 shots, depending on the vaccination, or that single shot, depending on the vaccination, as long as you're fully vaccinated, you've passed that period of the vaccination to kick in your body prior to travel or arrival, that's all that most governments require, and not a booster shot.
Okay, great. I hope that answers your question, Paul. The next 2 questions, I'll put it together. It's by Margaret and Murugasu. Margaret's asked about, she's just like you, considers Sabah her second home. And so she's asking if she would need to quarantine in Sabah. So on that note, in that context, Murugasu's question, I think, is connected to that as well. Are there any restrictions for domestic flights? As in, let's say you were to fly from KL to Penang, for instance.
Okay, so maybe I'll talk about Sabah itself. So Sabah is in that form and in that link that I shared available just now, is that you just need to fulfill the requirements in that form and prove that with a RTK test that you are negative and you don't need quarantine when you arrive Sabah as of now. Okay, it might change, but as of now, and it's always recommended to refer to that website for the updates. But as far as I've known till now, that's not required. No quarantine required when you go into Sabah, as long as you fulfill that requirement. Now, in terms of other domestic areas travel with other states, Malaysia Airlines do not, but it is up to individual airlines. But if I were to talk about Malaysia Airlines, they do not mandate it for a lot of places. And sometimes it's depending on the state as well, whether they want or insist on it. But it's up to the individual airline. And as of now, even Malaysia Airlines for domestic flights, it's not required for those within Peninsula. I can say that.
Okay, that's great. That's good news. At least we can travel domestically and it's less complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I have my trips all planned out.
Okay, great. We have time for just one more question, and this is by Paul, who's mentioned that it's generally quite difficult to get travel insurance for those above the age of 70. Now, can you please let me know the insurance companies that welcome those above 70s to purchase insurance, or any other advice you might have in relations to purchasing insurance?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And it triggered back to the talk that I attended just yesterday in terms of the inbound travel insurance for people coming into Malaysia. And to be upfront with everyone is that they do not cover for people above 70, all right? But while I say that as well, even the government does not mandate, so to say, for our side is that people above 70 do not need to purchase that insurance. So it's a give and take kind of thing. But as for the insurance that going outbound, for those above 70, we can actually try and relook at it. Currently, there is one that is the only one in the market I'm open to share with you is actually provided by AXA Travel. They have a pandemic insurance. AIG is coming up with their own version, and that is really specific for COVID-19. But yeah, usually because there's no prior checks, before purchasing this insurance, there might be a limitation to the 70 years. So yeah, that is really subject to the individual insurance companies on their age of coverage. But yeah, 70 is usually the benchmark put there.
Okay, great. Okay. Jeffrey, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for the questions today. You can tell from the questions is a reflection of the interest that people have in wanting to travel right now. So we just like to say thank you very much, Jeffrey, for taking the time today to enlighten every one of us with the do's and don'ts, so to speak, about travel. Coming up next, folks, we have AXA Insurance. Funny you should mention AXA just now because AXA is coming up right after you.
I hope I didn't quote them wrongly.
Now, coming up next, we have Encik Haris Abdul Rahim from AXA Insurance, who will be talking to us about also a very interesting, timely topic about safe driving and readiness in the event of car accidents. So everyone, this is something for you to also take note of. What Encik Haris will be doing is providing an overview of the type of car insurance available in the market for individual customers and what sort of extensions available to enhance your vehicle protection, among other things. So on that note, Jeffrey, thank you once again for joining us for the Amazing Seniors launch and for providing us the information that you have. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a short break and we'll come back at in about 8 minutes.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for this
Thank
time.
you. Thank
All
you.
right.